making a choice of four selected composers out of 300 it's almost an impossible task, but it was still an enjoyable experience.
This was really the hardest jury I was ever in, because Yannis just said over 300 scores, but in fact it was 303 times 3 or 4 scores, so it was around 1,000. But it took me weeks. I had to make a schedule, and I had to do a certain amount of pieces every day. And we made shortlists and shortlists and shortlists and narrowed it down step by step.
It was again and again kind of positive surprise. I opened an application and I heard pieces. They are so diverse, and they brought so interesting perspectives on the phenomenon of music.
Authenticity, originality, the fact that you got a sense that the choices that were made by the composer in the composition came from the idea itself and from the identity or personality of the composer, that it's not like just simply a convention that is being followed.
The criteria for the evaluation I have to question again and again with every piece. It has to convince me. And who is the I? Yeah. And for sure, on the one hand, I bring filters. If I want or not, I am not infinitely open. Yeah. But on the other hand, I have also to question my limits when I'm reading new pieces, also when I'm teaching. So it's kind of dialogue with pieces. It's dialogue with myself.
Some pieces stand out, like Isabel just said. They have some individual vision. They try something, they risk something, and this is where it gets interesting, I think.
Matthew Grouse, he's a British composer living in Denmark. One of his pieces, Calls to This Number Are Being Diverted, a brilliant music theatre piece, was his first selection. We really loved also his two other pieces, Control Y, which is really this kind of combination of the performative and live electronics, where four musicians are predominantly interfacing with a computer keyboard. You know, we all thought this was like a really virtuoso piece. This is a composer who will be doing really interesting things in the coming years. So we are very curious what he's going to do in the festival.
What I really like is the scope of his compositions. It's relatively rare that composers have also this theatrical talent. I can only think of a few colleagues who write theater pieces and also write great compositions. And this is what I really like about Matthew's selection. It was extremely varied. It was also fun. I really enjoyed the humor inherent in the pieces, but it also has a very musically solid side, and I'm really curious to explore more of his work.
Golnaz Shariatzadeh. I was invited to go deeper into that piece on the one hand because I felt up from the beginning there's something very personal. On the other hand, I got the impression that this piece is extremely reflexive about how to deal with something very individual in the context of aesthetic. This music is very individually looking for musical articulation, for intimate sound, for transformation of intimate sound. So there's a fragility, but on the other hand, there's a very, very competent connection between this sensible or fragile phenomena, and that I found at the end of the day really very expressive.
The Golnaz music was extremely poetic. She had extremely beautiful texts for her pieces, which is of course not the most important thing, but it tells you a bit about how the composer approaches music. And as she's also, I think, an artist, a visual artist, you can tell that she has created always a situation for each of her pieces. She describes a situation like being separated from the mother in the main piece, Mom, but also how she describes herself being in a room. And so there's always this sense of space in her music, I think, that is quite important and which I really enjoyed. Robin Haigh entered a really daring piece called Aesop. And it is daring because it is using himself as an untrained recorder player. I have written a lot of pieces for recorder myself, and I know that recorder can sound pretty horrible if not played well. And so I was really curious how he would write a piece that uses this, because of course, if somebody is untrained, it will have a certain rough quality of sound. And the piece was so musically convincing and so full of surprises and variation. And I thought this is really a great idea to use instruments in an untrained way, but not as an improvisation, but really with notation and everything. So that composer was definitely one we had very early on our radar, and so the whole selection was very much fun to look at. All the pieces have an interesting element.
I have the impression this composer has a vision of complex simplicity in a way. So it reminds me also to music coming from different areas in the world of oral culture, where every detail must be significant enough to be memorizable, to stay in mind, but to go on with flexibility. And that's why I find this music simple and complex at the same time, because on the one hand, it was dealing with simple phenomena, but the continuity of this phenomena was full of surprising developments. Yaz Lancaster, the piece Ouroboros. This piece was really very poetic. I was impressed how it moves through the question of identity of musical phenomena. I hear a lot of references on the one hand, but on the other hand, I hear how these references are become to be an inner world that is extremely individually speaking.
Yaz Lancaster has both experimental side, but also a very communicative and also direct emotional side in the use of voice and a different way of doing theatre in their work. And I think this combination of the sort of like directness and communicative side makes it very contemporary, and it's going to really resonate a lot in the festival, I think.